Hey Grace Church, welcome to the weekly for the week of June 16th. My name is Jesse.
And I'm Desiree.
Today we're talking about how do we as a church raise up young people to be resilient disciples of Jesus.
We looked at James chapter 1, and we saw that God uses challenging moments to shape us into the image of God. And I gave this image of a crock pot, that we don't always see what's going on as we are slow roasting our food, but we trust that when we are in these trials and difficult seasons, that God is actually discipling us and shaping us into his image.
And James tells us that when we're in these trials, we need to ask God for wisdom. This is not easy for us. We like to do it on our own. But James is saying we need to ask God. We need help when it comes to parenting and raising up the young generation to understand how to be resilient disciples in the complicated cultural moment that we find ourselves in.
And the best help that we can ever receive is from the Holy Spirit. I love this part of the Trinity because I call it my parenting superpower. This is what allows me to have patience and love and listen to my children and be more present with them and present to their needs.
So as we get a little bit more practical, I think it's helpful to view parenting as stages. And so we talked about the 4 C's of parenting: the caregiver, the cop, the coach, and the consultant. And you are going to be having different, you're going to parent differently through each one of these phases. First, you're just going to care for the basic needs of the kid. Then you're going to establish the rules and enforce the rules as a cop. That's between like age 4 and 12. Then 13 through 18, you become the coach. You no longer are the cop, but you have to transition to letting kids have natural consequences, and then through conversation, helping them understand how to navigate the world while they're still under your roof. And then finally, when they launch, you are then a consultant. They're in the world on their own trying to figure it out.
And throughout these 4 C's, it's important to keep our relationship with our kids healthy and thriving. And one of the main goals that we have as parents is that when our kids don't have to be around us, when they're in that final C stage, that they still want to be around us, that they want to come home. And so we want to keep that relationship healthy and thriving. We also want to focus on protection. We talked about some heartbreaking stats on child abuse, specifically sexual abuse, and we know that this is a reality in our world today, and so we want to navigate these 4 C's with wisdom as we protect our children.
We want to protect our kids, and we want to challenge our kids, because trying to bubble wrap them to be protected from the world actually, without us intending to, can actually make them weak. Overly coddling them could allow them to not know how to engage and reach and love the world with the truth and the grace of the gospel. And so in this tension, we talked about 3 different spaces that are really practical.
And the first one we talked about was school. There are so many options for schooling our kids here in San Diego, but we want to make sure that we are approaching our school decision with wisdom and discernment from the Holy Spirit, knowing what's best for our particular children. For us, we have decided on our neighborhood public school. We see our kids as missionaries. We see our family as missionaries to our neighborhood. And so we have decided to get involved in our school, get to know families, and also be a filter for what they learn in school versus what the truth of the Bible is. And so we get to be that filter at home before we send them into their school space.
Yeah, and one of the things we talked about, the second space, was having the talk, the birds and the bees. And I shared how I went through a couple different workbooks with my boys, my older boys, when they were about 8 to 10 and then 9 and 11. And the importance of having the talk and having these conversations early, before they start having it with their friends, so that we can begin to shape their understanding from a God-centered worldview and biblical perspective, so that and if you don't have it before they talk to their friends, then they're going to shut down. They're not going to want to talk about it. They're already going to understand it from their perspective, which we don't want to do. We want to get there early. And then the third space was technology, and essentially research shows us that we need to limit and protect our kids in the online world and give them more freedom in the actual world. And so we need to, as parents, be vigilant and protective and learn how and when is appropriate to allow our kids to engage in technology and social media and phones. And then we also need to, as much as possible, get them into the real world, real relationships, real struggles in the real world as much as possible.
And so we hope, Grace Church, whatever season you find yourself in, whether you are a mentor or a parent or a youth leader or a youth, we hope that you saw today that it is through wisdom and power of the Holy Spirit that we are able to empower the next generation to become resilient disciples.